Yay. Okay, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't usually do uh, live streams or record videos. Um, I watch a lot of YouTube, follow a bunch of content creators, don't make content. I'm just a guy. Um, I'm a guy who happens to be a Freemason, actually. And so I'm putting together this video because I wanted to actually respond to another video from the old-fashioned Masonic podcast titled Exclusivity is a Must in Freemasonry, a Texas Freemasons Bold Stance, in which, let's see, Right Worshipful Jim Rumsey of the Grand Lodge of Texas talks about his view on the future of Freemasonry and what he believes is holding Freemasonry back. Um, and his core argument is that Freemasonry has gotten away from the exclusivity that typified it in past generations. Um, and he talks about the need for Freemasons to be more exclusive, but he doesn't really talk about how to define exclusivity. Um, Now, when I hear those words, I tend to know what they mean. Uh, I don't want to throw too much shade here, but they sound to me like dog whistles for a certain type of exclusivity. That Freemasonry needs to get back to. It needs to get back to cisgendered, heterosexual, white men, patriarchal, I actually don't know what it means by exclusive in a certain sense. I mean, I hear about the country club, but I also hear talk about blue collar people. Um, you know, it's sort of nebulous. But I do know that my view is that Freemasonry is organized as an inclusive society, albeit a religious inclusive society. Men of any religion can join Freemasonry, and so to a certain degree, it's not an exclusive society at all. It's by design very inclusive, um, but there are views about women, and there are views about trans people, there are views about gay folks, and unfortunately, even in some places, there are views about black men. Um, so I guess the core of this video is I want to just say that I think the real problem with Freemasonry is that society produces certain kinds of people. We have our culture, we have our people who are engaging with one another and having children and raising them and creating families. And through the processes of culture and family formation, society produces certain types of people. Freemasonry as an organization is sort of downstream from that process. So Freemasonry is a consumer of people, right? So people come to Freemasonry, you get a certain like funnel, right? And you get a wide funnel at the top if society is producing more of the people that, Freemasonry as the funnel is consuming. And the argument that Freemasonry is not working because it's not exclusive enough, I just don't think that makes sense. My experience is that the type of Freemasonry, the type of person that Freemasonry wants to become Freemasons is simply fewer and fewer in society. Society that all the infrastructure of culture and social organization that produces the broad swath of individuals, it's simply not producing the same type of people, the same type of person that it did a century ago, or post World War II, or even during World War II, or during the 50s, or during the 60s, or during the 70s and 80s. Every decade produces a different composition of people, of different Americans with different sets of beliefs and ways of seeing the world. And Freemasonry, in traditional Freemasonry, there are the core requirements. You have to be a man, freeborn, of some religious proclivity, and of good report, right? And obviously the sticking points in here are the man and the uh, religious belief, because these are the things that I think are in most flux. I think most Masons agree that the freeborn thing as a tool to exclude black men is no longer valid. You don't see states generally discriminating against black men. Um, I think there is non-recognition of Prince Hall Masonry in 3 states, 4 states if you count Louisiana, but when the Grand Master of the Prince Hall Masons gets thrown out of the Prince Hall Conference, of Prince Hall Masons in Louisiana, gets thrown out of the Prince Hall Conference of Grand Masters, you know that there's something afoot, specifically and especially in Louisiana that is, I think, a matter entirely on its own, other than that is not related to historical antagonisms and possibly, even probably, discrimination. So societies continue to produce different people, and there's a lot of data on this, but I'm 35. I'm a millennial. Millennials are one of the best educated generations in American history. We have the most degrees of any generation in American history, coincidentally, not coincidentally. We also have the most student debt. But we are incredibly well educated as a generation. We are less religious. We are more inclusive. And so, and specifically, we're more inclusive in ways that are that shrink that pool of people that would go down to the Freemasonry funnel and ultimately become a single-sex and religious Freemasons, who would participate potentially in traditional Freemasonry. So, like that I think is the actual root of Freemasonry's membership concerns and the long-term threat to its viability as a social institution. Social institutions work because they serve the needs of society. You don't have organizations leading society and generally, in most cases, in like shaping society to produce the type of person who becomes a part of that society, except in places like Iran, where you have an Islamic dictatorship which uses social engineering to force people to behave and believe a certain way, thereby feeding back into the machinery of that social institution through the machinery of the state. In the United States, things are very different. You have instead free people who make decisions for themselves and for their families, and everything that we do socially is downstream from the ways that we choose to think and to live our lives. The threat, the real problem for Freemasonry is society is changing. And I know that a lot of guys will, maybe it's that we don't wear blazers to the lodge anymore, we don't wear suits, people don't take it seriously. I don't know. I talk with a lot of very intelligent people every day. I live inside the Beltway. I live near Washington, D.C. I work around people who do work in the government and in the federal government. And these are not by any stretch people who you would say are not elite. I mean, these are some of the most intelligent, hardworking people who exist in our country. And there's simply a chasm that exists between the type of person who comes to live and work and contribute to government here in Washington, D.C., and the institution of Freemasonry. And it's not a gap that can be crossed by telling people that they have to wear blazers and all dress up and look a certain way. It's a social gap, it's a cultural gap, it's an intellectual gap. And the only way to actually close that gap is for Freemasonry to change, which is precisely what many Freemasons are saying they don't want to do. They're not only saying that they don't want to do it, they say that they can't. And obviously it's a social institution. These are not laws written on stone that are inalterable. It's a social institution. We all decide collectively how to govern our social institutions, what what the standards of behavior are, who's allowed, etc. So things could change, but there are a lot of men who don't want that, who are Masons, and so I think to a certain extent, until Masonry, traditional Freemasonry, single sex, and religious Freemasonry recognizes that the raw material of Freemasonry, which is human beings, uh, has changed, there's not really going to be any sort of change in the long-term fortunes of the institution. Um, I'm looking at the social trends. We all know that the majority of Freemasons today are older men. They are following their biological path. Many are laying up their working tools every year, and they're taking with them they're leaving behind an organization that they didn't prepare to adapt for the society that is coming after them. Um, and I think that's the real conversation that we have to have. It's not about wearing a blazer and not wearing jeans. It's really about um, thinking about Freemasonry's place in American society and deciding whether or not uh, the people who care about Freemasonry care enough about seeing Freemasonry continue to add value to society that they're willing to figure out how to make Freemasonry meet society where society is, because they're not going to change society in the ways that will cause society to produce more people who are more likely to meet the current requirements of Masonic membership in most places in the United States. You already see places like England deciding to allow transgender people into Freemasonry. There is recognition of women's Freemasonry as a separate but completely legitimate and valid social enterprise, which is something that can be said about currently no U.S. state. No U.S. state recognizes any Masonic body that admits women, except possibly the Grand Lodge of England. And again, even then, I hear a lot of talk from American Masons about their concerns there. They want to continue to maintain gender exclusivity. Um, but I live in a place with a lot of intelligent people, elite people. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who would love to take part in a club or a society like Freemasonry. They're simply not going to if they believe that they would be taking part in something that is not simply an organization that discriminates in ways that they don't accept, but in ways that perpetuates harms that they also do not accept and would not feel comfortable contributing to. Um, Homophobia, sexism, transphobia, and even some things on belief. Again, religious belief in the United States is declining. The main problem of religious belief is as we've accumulated more knowledge and become a more scientific society, we've started to demand proof for things. Religious faith does not provide proof, scientific proof, empirical proof of its claims. So you simply have fewer people who are believers because they can't prove the thing that they're being asked to take on faith. And again, that's simply not going to change. So that's it. That's the video. That's my take on the challenges facing Freemasonry. I am a member of the George Washington Union. We are a liberal or continental or an inclusive Masonic jurisdiction. We have lodges in several states. We have lodges in several countries. We allow women, LGBTQ people, and non-believers. We believe that Freemasonry can benefit any person of friendly and cooperative conscience who is trying to figure out how they can improve themselves and the world around them by working with others who are on the same path. if you're curious to learn more about us, you can visit our website at gwufreemasons.org. And I love Freemasonry. I want to be clear. I've been a Mason now for probably close to a decade. And, I hear from other people the similar thing. There's been nothing that has changed my life quite like my Masonic journey. But I think that in order to maximize the impact that Freemasonry can have in the world, we've got to think strategically about how we're engaging with society. And that includes recognition that not all people who can benefit from Freemasonry or use Freemasonry to change the world around them are going to look like me, or like most of you who probably will watch this.